Hi, welcome. I'm so glad you're here with us today for another Bold Women Lawyers LinkedIn Live. We have a great guest. I'm so excited to talk to her today. We're talking to Rho Thomas. Now, Rho has a really interesting background. She's an attorney and a financial coach. She believes that true wealth is having control of your time, and boy, is she right about that. She helps lawyers master their money to create freedom and choice in their lives. And she hosts the wealthy, oh boy, you're going to have to help me with that.
Yeah, Wealthiest. You got it.
Wealthiest. Yeah, I got it. Wealthiest podcast, where she can share strategies each week for lawyers to improve money mindset and manage their money to achieve true wealth. So I am excited to have her here and to hear from her today about how we can all be better with money. But Rho, welcome. Thank you for agreeing to join us. I'm happy to have you. And I'd first like, before we get into the nitty gritty of the money and handling and mindset and all of those issues, can you just explain to us a little bit about your journey? Because you are a lawyer, and I know you practiced as law for a period of time. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so explain to us how you ended up doing what you're doing now.
Yes. So, as you mentioned, I am a lawyer. I practiced law for 7 years as trademark lawyer. And my journey to being a financial coach started with my own personal financial journey. So about 5 years ago, my husband and I realized that we had over $670,000 of debt. That included our $200,000 mortgage, about a $10,000 car loan, and then the rest of that was student loans. And it all came up because we had our first child, and the firm that I practiced at offered a reduced hours policy where I could have done a percentage of the billable hours, say, 70% of the billable hour requirement for 70% of my salary. And so I was like, oh, maybe I'll take advantage of this. And then we looked at the finances and saw those numbers, and it was like, oh, guess I won't be doing that.
Wow.
And so we started on this journey to, learning more about managing our debt. Because to that point, Sharon, we've been doing what we thought we were supposed to do, right? Like we paid our credit cards in full every month. We were saving a little bit. We were maxing out our retirement accounts, but we had not done anything as far as the student loans go. Like we were just paying the minimum that the government tells you to pay and, that kind of thing. And so when we started looking into, okay, how can we manage our money better? Like, what can we do about this debt? We were coming across people who were paying off their loans in 3 years, 5 years. I saw a couple who paid off their house in 5 years. And all of those people, it's like knew something that we didn't, right? It's like, oh, you don't only have to pay the amount that they tell you to pay. And so we started on that journey of paying off our student loans and really leaning into like being intentional with our money. And from there, over the last 5 years, we've paid off all of those student loans. So a little under $500,000, and paid off that car loan, of course, as well. And we've just been like really leaning into how can we manage our money with intention, building wealth so that we have that freedom and flexibility that I talk about. Mm-hmm. At the time, we were thinking like being able to do some sort of part-time schedule with my job because we had at that time one child. Now we have two. But of course, we could not foresee that 5 years later, there would be a global pandemic and, all of that. And so the work that we had done on our finances to that point has enabled me to leave the position and lean more into the financial coaching, which I had started doing a little bit on the side while I was working. I was doing a blog, sharing our journey. People would ask, like, how are you doing this? And I would help them. And then I started leaning into doing it more. And now here I am. I found that it lights me up in a way that practicing trademark law didn't, although I enjoyed what I did. But I really like the way that I'm able to help people now and help them not make the mistakes that we were making. So here we are.
Wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So let me back up a little bit and ask you, first of all, you talk about being intentional with money. Mm-hmm. Can you explain for us a little bit more what that means specifically? I've heard that phrase before, but tell me what that means for you and how do you do it?
Yeah. So for me, it means making decisions about what you're doing with your money. and making decisions, like conscious decisions, right? Because everything that we do is a decision, but deciding I want to spend this amount on this type of thing. I want to put this amount toward my savings or this amount toward my debt. What I find often happens with lawyers is we are spending money and we have no idea where it's going, right? We're spending, we're swiping, we're, doing the DoorDash and the Uber Eats and like all of the takeout and going to restaurants and, buying different things. Amazon is a big one, but we are not being intentional or conscious about the decisions that we're making around how much we're spending. And so I think having that awareness of where your money is going currently is one of the best things that you can do, because from there you can decide, do I like these things that I'm spending on, right? Do I like the amounts that I'm spending? And if not, then I'm going to change that. I'm going to make decisions about how much I want to spend on these different categories and go from there.
Now, I'm just curious when you described your journey, of course, no one saw the pandemic coming. No one saw all of the effects of that. But I know personally, one of the things that I experienced, because I wasn't going out, I didn't need the clothes when I went to do my hearings. There's a lot of things I didn't need now. And one of the things that was an eye-opener for me was the thought of, I didn't really need that much before. And it really was just right in my face, like, wow. I wasn't going crazy, like with clothing and that kind of thing. But when I looked at my closet, I'm like, this will last me a very long time. Are you seeing that at all with any of your clients?
So I definitely have seen exactly what you describe, especially as related to things like clothing, where people had been, staying home, they were doing things more virtually. And so it's like, oh, maybe I didn't need to refresh my wardrobe as often as I was. However, people were seeing an uptick in the Amazon and takeout and things like that because they're home. And it's like, oh, let me see what's going on Amazon. Oh, this looks really cool. Let me buy it right now. Let me order out because I don't feel like cooking again. So, I see it both ways.
Mm-hmm. So we're certainly, I believe, an instant gratification kind of society, probably like many other societies. But the Amazon, okay, let me order it. It's coming tomorrow. How do you break that?
So the way that I tell my clients is often we don't need the thing right now, right? So if you put it in your cart and then have a day, maybe it's Saturday morning, right? You go through all the things throughout the week that you thought that you had to have from Amazon. And it's like, okay, it's, 3 days later, it's 4 days later. Do I still want this thing? Often when you give yourself that space, you find that you don't want the thing as much anymore. And so you can decide with intention, like we've talked about, whether I'm actually going to purchase all of these things in this cart, or if not, which things I do want to purchase and which ones I'm going to let go.
Oh, that's a great idea. That is a great idea, because you're right. Sometimes by the time it shows up from Amazon, I mean, I've had this experience where I look and go, I'm sending this back. I don't need this. Why did I buy this? What was I thinking?
What a lot of people do is like the box comes like, what the heck did I order from Amazon? Like can't even remember what they've ordered by the time it actually gets there 2 days later, right? And so give yourself a little space before you hit buy now, right? Give yourself a little space, put it in the cart, and then decide if that's what you want to buy.
That's a great idea. Well, let me move on to some of the, bigger purchases that we all face. A mortgage for the house, car payments, and then school loans that you mentioned. How does somebody start if they look and say, oh my gosh, I've got these debts. I'll be at retirement still paying them off if I don't do something about it now. What would you say should be the first step that somebody would take?
I think the first step is looking at the numbers, because so often we feel so overwhelmed, like, oh, I have so much debt, but we don't know how much it actually is, right? So look at the numbers and see what you actually owe to whom, right? Maybe make a list and you can then organize them. I like to use the debt snowball method, which is where you pay your debts off from smallest balance to largest balance. Because, for instance, I mentioned that we had $670,000 of debt. Well, the smallest loan was like $1,500. So it's like, oh, we can knock that one out. Then, it was 2,000, 2,500, 3,000, 5,000. And we worked our way up to the biggest one, which was my husband's consolidated student loan, was like 350,000. But by that point, we had paid off like 14 other loans, and we had built all of this momentum, right? Like we had those kind of smaller, 1,000, 1,500. Then we got into some of the 5-figure, 20,000, 35,000, et cetera. And then we got to that really big multi-6-figure one. But we had all of this evidence behind us of our ability to pay it off. And, you're getting these paid in full letters. Like early on, we would get a paid in full letter a month, right? Like, oh, congratulations, you paid this off, right? Because $1,500, $2,000, you feel so great, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Did you do a happy dance?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
All the happy dances over here.
But you said something really interesting, because I think this might be something that does stop a lot of people. You don't have to do it all at once.
You don't.
Right?
Yeah. You absolutely don't. And I think often thinking that you have to do it all at once is what stops us from even starting. I actually did a post on LinkedIn today talking about how when my husband and I first started, what we were able to do was $150 extra a month. And we were in that phase that I just talked about of not knowing where our money was going. Like we were, saving a little, we were maxing all of that, but the rest of it was probably all these restaurants around Atlanta. Like, I don't know, they have all the money, right? And so like when we started being intentional and making our first budget, like where we were, it was like, okay, $150 extra. That was not moving the needle much on 600 something thousand, but it was a start. And so then from there, we were able to build up to, okay, we can tweak this a little bit more. We actually don't need to, spend as much on this. Then also we got increases in our income over the years. And so we were able to put more, all of that. But it started with $150 extra, right? And so I think starting, like even the smallest step, starting gets you moving forward, and then you can build momentum from there. And then especially if you're using that debt snowball method that we just talked about, where, you're tackling a $1,500 or a $3,000, something small, right? Then you're going to see that progress much faster, and you're going to get those kind of like gratifications, right? The instant gratification that we love, but on something that is moving you forward financially.
And that's a great comment, because what you referred to before, when you would get the paid in full letters, that must have been so encouraging to say, oh, I like this. I want more of these. And so when you think, am I going to spend on X? And you balance it against, oh, but if I don't, then I'm going to get that paid in full letter that much sooner.
Yeah.
I would think that then helps you psychologically to say, oh yeah,
Absolutely does.
Yeah, I want that paid in full. Yeah.
No, it absolutely does. And so that's why I'm a huge fan of that method. Like some people talk about the fact that mathematically speaking, you end up paying more than if you were to do, for instance, attacking the highest interest rate, regardless of the balance. But oftentimes those higher interest rates often are higher balances as well. So like you're trying to attack a, $25,000 loan and chipping away with my $150 a month payment.
Right.
You're not getting that psychological payoff in the same way as when you're paying off those smaller loans more quickly. Something though that you said triggered a thought in me, where you said, oh, am I going to spend on this, or am I going to put it toward my student loans? Like I want to get that paid in full letter. I always encourage my clients to have money that is literally designated for fun or for, like I have people who love eating out, right? So I'm going to set aside this money for the restaurants, for the takeout, all of that, because what happens, especially for us lawyers, we're like, oh, I should be being responsible. I should be using this for a more responsible thing. And you shame yourself when you go and spend money on the clothes or the takeout or whatever the thing is that's not, quote, responsible, because in your mind, all your money should be going to this financial goal that you have. So instead, decide, again, that intention coming back, right? Decide how much you want to spend on entertainment or on these things that matter to you. And that way you're able to spend on those without that layer of like shame and judgment or whatever of like, oh, I should be spending this on this. Like, no, actually, I should be spending it on these clothes, or I should be spending it on this restaurant because that's what I've decided to do. So you're literally giving yourself permission to do it on the front end. So when you spend it, you're not thinking, oh, I should be doing something else with it.
That's a great point. And as you were talking, it reminded me of crash dieting versus changing your lifestyle.
Yes, exactly.
Because you can lose weight crash dieting, but you'll never sustain it. You'll go back to your old habits. Whereas what you're talking about is certainly modifying your lifestyle, but not making it so strict that, as you said, you feel guilty about every little thing that you do. And I mean, let's face it, you do have to have, clothes for court and for meeting clients as a lawyer at some point. So you're not going to look shabby. And at some point, you do need to spend the money on the clothing or just to go have fun, because otherwise, what's the point of working if you can't have any fun, right?
Exactly that. Like I tell my clients all the time, like you're allowed to spend money just because you want to, even if you have debt, you're allowed to. And just making those decisions ahead of time about how much you're going to spend and sticking to what you said will help you to have that fun, to spend on the clothes, whether for court or just because you want a new outfit, and still make progress on your goals. You make sure that you're not taking yourself away from that. But your point about, the crash diets versus the lifestyle change, like I often say that money management is very similar to weight loss, because it's not about, let me deprive myself and spend no money and, whatever until I pay off all of my student loans or save the amount I want to save or whatever it is. It really is about that sustainable change, because once you finish paying off the student loans, you still don't want to go back to spending all of your money and then not saving for retirement or investing to build wealth, or, you're going to have other goals for your money. And so if you make it a lifestyle change versus I just got to willpower my way through and, deprive myself and be really strict, make it that lifestyle change. And then it's a way of managing your money for the rest of your life that is sustainable, that you're not going to be going back and forth, like spending it all and then spending nothing and being really strict and then spending it all again,
Yeah. So you've mentioned a couple times investing for wealth. And again, I hear that a lot from, financial experts. Tell me what you mean by that.
Yeah. So what I mean, and let me say up front, I do not give specific investing advice. Like that is, I will leave that to my financial planner, financial advisor colleagues. But what I mean is you don't only want to be putting your money into a savings account. Right. Like I remember when I had my brick and mortar savings account and they would send me my like bank statement. Oh, congratulations. You earned 3 cents on this. Like, thank you very much.
Thanks. Yeah.
But you don't want to only have your money in a savings account. You want to be investing in some vehicle. I think most of us are familiar with the stock market. So investing in the stock market, you're going to get a higher return than you would get on a savings account. And I heard something once that like really has stuck with me. It says your money will work harder for you than you ever can. So you investing that money, it's earning money, right? And then that interest that it earns starts earning interest as well. And it grows in that way. There are other ways to invest though as well. You might know about real estate investing, people investing in businesses, people investing in cryptocurrencies, like all of these different things. The thing that I always encourage though is to know what you're investing about. So it's not just, oh, my uncle's friend had a hot stock tip, and so I'm just going to do that, right? Like make sure that you understand it, because it's still your money. And like, yes, there is more risk involved when you're investing, but there's also the greater potential for reward. So make sure that you're learning about, whatever it is that you want to invest in, but you do want to be investing aside from just putting money in a savings account.
Okay. Great advice. So a word I don't hear used a lot anymore related to finances is budgeting. Is that something that you think is important? Should people have a
Yes.
budget? Do people make budgets? I mean, I know for myself what I do, but in general, do people do that anymore? Tell me
Yeah,
about it.
so it's always interesting when people tell me that they don't have a budget because I think everybody has a budget. You might not have an intentional budget. You might not have
Mm,
decided, right? But like your budget is nothing more than the plan for how you're going to spend your money. And so we are all spending our money in some way. It's just whether you are intentionally deciding this is how I'm going to spend or not. I encourage my clients to use a zero-based budget. It's what my husband and I use. And basically, it's every dollar that comes into my account in the month is getting allocated in some way, whether it's to an expense, to a financial goal, whatever it is. And so, if we bring in $5,000, then we've got $5,000 between the expenses and the financial goals that we're going through. That does not mean that there's zero in your bank account, right? Like you want to have a buffer in your bank account. But when you're bringing that money in, you're making sure that you are using it for some intentional purpose. Like I said, some bill, other expense, some of the fun money that we talked about, the debt, the investing, whatever it is. Because if you don't account for it, then a lot of times you get into these money leaks where like you don't know where the money went. Like that you brought that money in, but you don't know what happened to it. And so accounting for every dollar of what you're going to do with it helps you to plug those leaks so that you don't end up not sure what happened to your money.
yeah, that's a good point. And you had mentioned in the beginning, when we first started talking, that a lot of times people can just be afraid to look at their numbers. And I understand that. I mean, I remember that way back when, like, I don't want to see it. And yet you have to be able to deal with it. But and I think it just comes from that feeling of overwhelm. So if somebody comes to you and that's how they feel, like, I know it's a lot, I can give you a ballpark, but I really haven't tracked it, or, and they may or may not be able to even articulate, like, I'm scared to look at it. How do you approach that?
Yeah. So if you're talking specifically about budgeting and where the money is going, is that what you're talking about? Or are you
No,
talking about debt?
just to getting them to the point of saying, listen, you need to look at it. It's,
We just
like, it
look at
is
it.
what it is. It is. And
Yeah, we
yeah.
just look at it. We have, there's a spreadsheet. So I give all of my clients the exact spreadsheets that my husband and I use. So we've got one that we use for our budget, one that we use for like our debt. Like when we were paying it off and figuring out like, okay, this is how we're going to organize it all so that we know what's going on. And then one that we use to track our net worth. And those are actually available on my website as well. So I can share those links with you if you wanted to share with the
Yes.
audience.
Tell me, and what's your website? I'm going to put it up.
Yeah. So my website is rhothomas.com, RHO Thomas.com. And the budget is rhothomas.com/budget.
Okay, hold on. I'll get that up in a second. Yeah.
But I will
So
say,
go
I
ahead.
will
So you were
continue answering the
talking,
question. Yeah. So
yeah, you were talking about the spreadsheets.
yes. So as far as the debt, like we have the debt spreadsheet that we use, and I'll have them go in and put the information in. And sometimes, Sharon, I'll give that information, like give that assignment, like, okay, go in, let's look at your numbers and put them in this spreadsheet and then bring them to our next call. And sometimes they come to the next call and they haven't done it. It's like, okay, so we're going to look at it together. Like, so let's go ahead and log into your account. Let's look, and we're going to fill in this spreadsheet. But honestly, it's just a matter of doing it. Like, I understand the fear. I was there, like, did not want to see $670,000, but I did, But I think to your point, if you don't know where you're starting, you don't know what you have, then you can't make a plan moving forward. And I often liken it to like hearing a noise in the dark. Like you don't know what the noise is. You're scared. You don't know what's happening, but then you shine a light on it. And it's like, oh, it was just, a squirrel in the backyard or whatever it is, right? Like often
Not that big a
that
deal.
fear
Yeah.
is worse than like the actual thing that's happening. And so just shining that light, kind of ripping the Band-Aid off,
Yeah.
seeing what you're working with, then you can make a plan to move forward. But if you just decide, or you say, I'm stuck, I don't want to look at it, I'm afraid to look at it, then you'll never be able to move forward, and you'll sit there spinning in that overwhelm and that fear.
Now, if somebody was interested in working with you, how would they contact you, and what, there's clearly some accountability in the work that you do, because and that's hugely important, I think. So, it's one thing to have a tool. It's a whole nother thing to be held accountable, or for somebody to help you, not in a negative way, but if you're stuck, to get over that hump. So tell us how people can get in touch with you, and a little bit about how you work with your clients.
Yeah. So I work one-on-one with clients for 6 months. We go through, what their goals are. Often it's some form of paying off student loans or building an emergency savings. Those are like the typical ones. But then sometimes it can be something that's less tangible, like, feeling more confident with money. Like I had one client who was getting married, and our fiance grew up in a family that talked about money a lot. He knew a lot about money, and she grew up differently. And so she wanted to understand her money better, and then also, be able to manage her budget better and start working on paying off her student loans. So those are the types of things that I work with my clients on, again, working one-on-one for 6 months. And if anyone is interested in working with me, you can schedule a consultation at rhothomas.com/call. If you can't remember that, rhothomas.com, there's a link that says work with me.
There you go. There you go. Oh, perfect. Yeah. And so, and so you do it for 6 months. So it's not just a one meeting and done. You're really there for
walking
a
with
good
you.
period of time.
Exactly. Exactly. From that very start of, I want to do this. I have no idea like what I'm doing. We go through what those goals are. I walk you step by step through creating the budget that you can manage, that does not feel restrictive, like we talked about, right? That incorporates those things that are important to you, and then making sure that you've got that surplus in your budget so that you have money that you can use toward whatever the financial goals are. Paying off the debt, building the emergency savings, saving for a house. A couple of my clients are saving for houses, things like that. And then each week we see what happened with your money this last week. What's been going on? Oh, you told me that you wanted to spend this much. Why did you spend that much? Like, what's happening? And we dig into some of those mindset things that come up, because we talked about, how I really talk about or dig into mindset a lot, because I think money mindset is so important. It's so much more than the strategies. I would say personal finance is 90% at least mindset, because we all know what to do, right? Like, there are so many different blogs and websites and books and, that tell you about budgeting and paying off debt and all of those things. We know what to do. Why aren't we doing it? Let's talk about that. Let's dig into all of that, and then make sure that you're getting yourself on track so that you're staying on track to achieve those goals that you set for yourself.
That's great. That is great. And that's a wonderful point, because you're right. And you're working with lawyers. Lawyers know how to research. It's what we do. And they know how to figure out what I should be doing. You can read the books. You're right. You can Google, what your question is. You can find answers. The real key is, why am I not doing it? And once you are able to identify that, and then sort of flip your mindset, I think it makes all the difference.
It really does.
Posted something this week that talks about when I was growing up. In a joking manner, my family would say about me, "Oh, money burns a hole in her pocket." And honestly, that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy until you get a hold of it and go, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. Money doesn't have to burn a hole in my pocket. Why am I doing, why am I doing that? But sometimes it stems from, I'm not blaming my family, believe me, but it just stems from things that you've heard along the way.
That you never questioned.
Exactly.
That's it.
That's right. That's right. So you're there to raise the questions, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, one of my favorite questions is like, is that true? Because sometimes people say things that are just so matter of fact. Like, is that true? It's like, oh, I never thought about that. Is it?
Yeah, it's great, because you may have been the first person that ever said to somebody, really, is that really true?
Yeah.
And make them stop and think. So it's wonderful. It's wonderful. And you and your husband are just a phenomenal example of what can be done. Well, particularly for people coming out of professional school, out of college, and then professional schools now, and just feel completely undone by the amount of debt that they've incurred
Yeah.
and are not at all sure how to dig out from under that. And there's
Yeah.
clearly ways to do it and ways that you can still have fun money, right?
Exactly. And something I'll say too is often I think because we are so educated, we use that education against ourselves to make ourselves wrong for having so much debt, right? I did it. I know people do it. I've got plenty of clients who do it. And I would want to say, like, it's okay. Like, you did the best that you could with the information that you had, right? So, like, beating yourself up or shaming yourself, feeling guilty for having the student loan debt, it's like, it's okay, right? You did it. It's here. We're going to make sure that we are aware of the numbers and then move on. And I will say, in our case, like, I created such a negative experience for myself early on because of all of that. Oh, why did we do this? I can't believe we have so much debt. Like all of that. Like, how did we get here? We should know better, right? That one's a big one. We should know better.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, why should you? For most of us, we're not taught about money, right? Like, your first experience learning about money is when there's a problem, right? When it's like,
Right.
oh, I have got multiple six figures. Let me learn something about money now,
In a hurry. Yeah.
And rather than also layering on top of that shame and the guilt and I should know better and I'm smarter than this. It's like, when I learned to give myself grace and just like relax a little bit, accept the fact that we have debt. And acceptance does not mean complacency, right? Like, I'm not like, oh, we've got this debt.
Right.
It's fine. Whatever. Right. Accepting the fact that I have debt rather than resisting it and feeling bad about it and beating myself up about it. When I could accept it and continue to still move forward with our plan of paying it off, I had a much better experience, and it was a much more easeful experience as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I likened it to like the beginning being like trying to push a boulder up a hill, right? Because it was always this like, oh, why are we doing this? We can't spend this. We can't do that. I was doing all the restrictive stuff, right? Like you can't buy this, you can't go out to eat, whatever. And then once we accepted it, we allowed ourselves to live life a little bit, right? Allowed for that fun money, all of that, and then still move forward. It was a much easier experience, even though that was like the bulk of the debt when we did that.
It's fabulous. And I love your point about give yourself grace. It's really, really important.
Agreed.
Yeah, really important. Well, Rho, you have been delightful to talk to. I have learned a lot. And I know everyone listening to this broadcast and to the replays has learned a lot. Remember, if you want to get in touch with Rho, www.rhothomas.com, and you can schedule some time to talk to her and see how she can help you with your debt issues and help you create a path to move forward that you're going to feel terrific about. So, Rho, thank you. And
thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it was my pleasure. You're delightful to talk to, and I look forward to seeing more about you. I see you a lot on LinkedIn. I look forward to seeing your posts and reading your posts because I always find them interesting.
Well, thank you so much, Sharon. It's such a pleasure to talk to you as always.
Well, thank you for coming. And to all of our listeners, come back next week. We're going to talk about, another mindset issue. So make sure you join me next week. I'll see you then.